Today, we are trying something a little bit different. We're going to take just one single day, August 12th, 2025, and look at all the major headlines that dropped. We're going to take this big, messy pile of news and find the story behind the stories.
You know that feeling, right? You open up your newsfeed, and it's just this blizzard of information. A political meltdown in one country, a crazy scientific breakthrough somewhere else, a human tragedy over here, and then some totally bizarre story that just makes you go, huh. It feels so random, so disconnected. But what if it isn't? What if all those headlines, all those seemingly separate little events, are actually pieces of a much larger puzzle? What if they're all secretly telling one big story about who we are and where we're headed?
Well, that's exactly what we're going to do in this explainer. We're going to connect those dots. We've scooped up all the key headlines from this one day, and we sorted them into 4 big themes. It's our attempt to find the hidden patterns, to turn that storm of chaos into something that, well, actually makes sense. So let's get into it and see what the world was really up to on this day.
Okay, our first theme for the day is what we're calling the global chessboard. This is all about power. You know, who's got it, who's making a grab for it, and who's desperately trying not to lose it. We're talking about those high-stakes games of international diplomacy, those bold power plays happening right at home, and all the friction that happens when big egos and big ambitions collide. Let's look at the opening moves.
First up, a classic move from the 2 biggest players on the board, the United States and China. So on this day, they agreed to extend a trade truce. They're basically hitting the pause button on a whole new round of tariffs. And the reaction is instantaneous. You could almost hear the collective sigh of relief from the financial world. Markets in Asia ticked up, Japan's Nikkei hit a new record, everyone's celebrating. But let's be honest with ourselves. As one source put it so perfectly, this is just kicking the can down a very bumpy road. And that's exactly it. This truce doesn't solve a single one of the fundamental disagreements. All that deep-seated conflict over who's going to control the future of technology, who really owns intellectual property, who has the most influence in the world, all of that is still simmering right there, just below the surface. So yeah, this is a temporary ceasefire. It's designed to calm the markets for a minute and buy everyone a little political breathing room. But that bumpy road, oh, it's still waiting for us.
Now let's turn to another player on this chessboard, one who's playing a much, much tougher hand. Ukrainian President Zelensky. He is on a diplomatic blitz. Why? Because there's a huge summit coming up between US President Trump and Russian President Putin, and Zelensky sees the writing on the wall. He's terrified that massive decisions about Ukraine's future are going to be made and there won't be a single Ukrainian in the room. So what's he do? He's scrambling. He's flying around rallying support from EU leaders, making sure his allies in NATO have his back. His goal, as this quote just brilliantly puts it, is to avoid being the main course on the summit menu. What a perfect image, right? This isn't just about getting a seat at the table, it's a desperate fight for agency. It's the classic struggle of a smaller nation caught between 2 titans, trying to make damn sure it's a participant in its own destiny, not just a topic on the agenda.
Of course, not all these power plays are international. Some of the most dramatic ones happen right at home. Take this number, 800. That is the number of National Guard troops that President Trump deployed onto the streets of Washington, D.C. on this day. He did it by invoking something called the Home Rule Act, which is a pretty obscure move that effectively puts the city's local police force under federal command. Now, the official reason given was to clamp down on rising crime, but for his critics, this looks like something else entirely. They're screaming that this is a totally unprecedented federal power grab. It's a dangerous blurring of the lines, testing the very idea of local control versus federal authority. And what's fascinating is this move mirrors another headline from today from halfway across the world in Argentina. The president there, Javier Milei, is pushing a new bill that would literally make it illegal for the country to ever have a budget deficit. It's this incredibly radical attempt to bake his austerity policies into the very legal fabric of the nation. See the connection? Both leaders are using the nuts and bolts of government in these really bold, really controversial ways to cement their power and force their will.
And this global chessboard, it isn't just about the big, stable powers making moves. On this very same day, if you look closely, you can see these tremors of instability just bubbling up in really crucial regions all over the planet. Just look at these 3 hotspots. First, in Mali, the military junta that's currently in power has just arrested dozens of its own soldiers, including a top general, claiming they were plotting a counter-coup. That shows you there are deep, deep cracks in their own power structure, which is terrifying for the stability of that entire region. Then you pivot over to Colombia. A massive political shockwave hits as Senator Miguel Uribe Turbay dies from wounds he got in an assassination attempt. Now, he was a huge conservative voice, a real presidential hopeful. His death instantly turns him into a powerful martyr for the right wing, potentially unifying a fractured opposition and completely rewriting the playbook for the 2026 election. And finally, over in Somalia, the federal government is making a really risky power play in the Jado region. They're basically ignoring the existing leadership and trying to install their own people. It's a move that could easily turn a long-running feud into a full-on violent conflict. 3 different continents, 3 different situations, but it's the same story underneath. Fragile political systems are under enormous strain.
And sometimes all this intense posturing and maneuvering on the global chessboard just gets, well, it gets downright clumsy. You have to hear this story. So in the super tense waters of the South China Sea, 2 Chinese ships, one's a Coast Guard vessel, the other is a Navy destroyer, they somehow managed to literally crash into each other. And why? You're not going to believe this. They were both trying to aggressively chase down and intimidate the same single Philippine Coast Guard ship. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This is so much more than a blooper reel moment. It's this perfect, almost darkly comedic illustration of what happens when these gray zone tactics, these strategies that are all about harassing and dominating an opponent without actually starting a war, go wrong. It's a strategy that's so aggressive, so on the edge, that you literally end up tripping over your own feet. A literal collision that shows everyone just how real the risks of this high-stakes game actually are.
Okay, let's shift gears now. We're gonna move away from the world of human rules and political games to a much bigger, much more powerful force, the planet itself. Our second theme is a planet under pressure. This is where we're gonna see how the natural world is pushing back in some pretty dramatic ways, and also how our own human decisions can create these shocking ripple effects that we just can't ignore. Let's start with a number that sounds like it's from a sci-fi movie, 332. So, what on earth is this? Well, it's the number of absolutely enormous canyons that scientists have just discovered hidden deep, deep beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. And when I say enormous, I mean it. Some of these things are over 4,000 meters deep. They rival the Grand Canyon, but they've been completely invisible to us until now. This is a monumental discovery. It literally changes our map of an entire continent. But the most important question we can ever ask with science news is, so what? Why does finding a bunch of canyons under miles of ice actually matter to you?
And here is the so what. This is the part that should really get your attention. Those canyons, they're not just empty geological features. Scientists now realize they act as highways for warm water. Just picture that for a second. They are perfect, deep channels that are funneling warmer ocean currents from the deep sea right up to the underside of the massive ice shelves. They're melting them from the bottom up, where it's most vulnerable and where we can't easily see it happening. This is a physical mechanism that our climate models have been seriously underplaying, or in some cases, not even including at all. So the discovery of these 332 warm water highways suggests that the great ice shelves of Antarctica could be destabilizing and collapsing much, much faster than even our most pessimistic models predicted. It's a genuinely chilling reminder of how much we still have to learn about how our planet works. And while scientists are uncovering that hidden slow-motion threat in Antarctica, nature's raw power is on full terrifying display somewhere else entirely. On the very same day, the island of Kyushu in southern Japan is getting absolutely pummeled by unprecedented torrential rainfall. This isn't just a bad storm, this is a full-blown catastrophe. It's triggering deadly floods and these huge, terrifying mudslides. And what makes it all the more tragic is that it's all happening during the Obon holiday week, a time when millions of Japanese people are traveling to be with their families. The country's legendary infrastructure is just paralyzed. It's a devastating reminder that even for a nation as wealthy, as technologically advanced, and as obsessively prepared for natural disasters as Japan, the sheer force of these escalating extreme weather events is becoming truly overwhelming.
But the pressure on our planet isn't just coming from nature. It's also coming from our own policies. And here we have a perfect, almost instantaneous example of cause and effect. So, step 1, the government in Argentina, as part of its bigger deregulatory political agenda, decides to gut its National Food Safety Service, a body called SENASA. That's a domestic policy decision made in Buenos Aires. Now, step 2, the reaction from its next-door neighbor Chile is immediate and it is severe. Seeing that the safety standards it has relied on for years are being torn apart, Chile instantly suspends all imports of meat and animal products from those regions in Argentina. Just like that, one country's political choice becomes another country's economic nightmare overnight. It's such a stark, real-time lesson in just how tightly woven our world is, where a single domestic policy can slam the door on a multi-million-dollar export industry in a matter of hours.
All right, I know. After all that talk about power struggles and planetary pressure, it's pretty easy to feel a bit down. But you have to remember, on the exact same day, August 12th, people were also busy building and creating and cooperating. So let's make a hard pivot to our third theme, blueprints for tomorrow. These are the stories of human ingenuity,
of forward-thinking collaboration and the really creative ways people are trying to build a better future. Okay, check this out. This is honestly one of the coolest blueprints I've seen in a long time. A design studio in Japan has just unveiled the first ever 3D printed house that's made almost entirely from local soil and sand. Now, I know we've all heard about 3D printed buildings before, but this is a real game changer. Why? Because the production of concrete is one of the single biggest sources of CO2 emissions on the entire planet. It's a huge climate problem. And by swapping out all that carbon-intensive concrete for locally sourced soil, this construction method cuts the emissions of building a home in half. 50%. This is that incredible moment where a technology goes from being a cool, niche curiosity you might see in a tech blog to a viable, scalable, and environmentally brilliant way to build our homes. This isn't just a house, it's a blueprint for a solution.
Blueprints for the future aren't just about physical buildings. They're also about building these incredibly powerful connections between nations. And on this day, India and Singapore are putting the finishing touches on a whole raft of new agreements. Now, this is not your boring, standard trade deal. The source material calls this strategic deepening. They're creating partnerships in high-tech, in green energy development. They're even planning for India to export green hydrogen to Singapore. But the most audacious piece of this entire blueprint, the part that really makes you lean in, is the plan for a brand new undersea cable connecting the two nations. And get this cable isn't just for internet data. It's designed to transmit electrical power. Just think about the ambition of that. It's a massive, visionary piece of infrastructure diplomacy. It's a physical link that will literally wire their economic and strategic futures together for decades to come. Building for the future can also mean building bridges with the past. And how's this for a creative diplomatic move? Indonesia has just announced that it's going to build a full-scale, perfect replica of the Bala Lampawah Palace, which is a famous historic royal house in the city of Cape Town, South Africa. And you might be thinking, why on earth would they do that? Well, it's to honor the legacy of a man named Sheikh Yusuf. He was a revered Indonesian scholar who was exiled to Cape Town hundreds of years ago, but he remains this powerful, historic link between the two cultures. This is just a masterclass in what political scientists call soft power. Instead of using military might or economic leverage, you use culture, you use history, you use shared values to build goodwill and strengthen ties. It's diplomacy built not with steel and concrete, but with wood, tradition, and respect. It's a really savvy and frankly beautiful move. So we've looked at the grand chessboard of global politics. We've looked at these huge planetary forces, and we've seen some inspiring blueprints for the future. For our final theme today, we're going to zoom all the way in. We're going to the most fundamental level of all, the human bottom line. This is where all those big headlines and abstract forces we've been talking about actually crash into the reality of individual lives. These are the stories of daily struggle, of quiet resilience, and of profound compassion. And here is where a global trend has a devastatingly human cost. The World Food Program announced today that it's being forced to cut food aid for hundreds of thousands of refugees in Kenya by a staggering 60%. Just let that number wash over you, 60%. That's not a line item on some budget spreadsheet in a faraway office. That is a lifeline. This cut directly impacts the most vulnerable people you can possibly imagine. New mothers, pregnant women, people with disabilities who can't work. It is the direct, brutal consequence of international aid budgets drying up and the world's attention shifting to other crises. It forces organizations into making these impossible, soul-crushing choices, and it's a decision that will, quite simply, cost lives. This is what happens at the human level when the world's attention moves on. But even amidst that kind of heartbreaking struggle, on the very same day, you find these incredibly powerful stories of individual action. This timeline tells one of them. A Canadian Mountie, an officer, is sent to do a routine welfare check on a senior citizen. He gets to the house, and the man is clearly unwell, but he's proud and he's refusing help. Now, the officer could have just ticked a box on his form, written "subject refused assistance," and left. But he didn't. He stayed. He spent over an hour just talking with this man, not as a police officer to a subject, but as one human being to another, building rapport, earning his trust. And it worked. The senior finally agreed to go to the hospital. And it's a very good thing he did. The doctors discovered he had a fatal internal bleed that would have killed him within just a few hours. That man's life wasn't saved by force or by procedure or by protocol. It was saved by 1 hour of patience and compassionate human connection.
And to finish up, let's just look at two final stories that perfectly capture the bizarre, complex, and contradictory nature of life on this one single day. On one side of the ledger, you've got this incredible story of hope and industry coming out of Somalia, a country we just saw dealing with political strife. Their traditional camel milk industry is being modernized. Local innovators are figuring out new hygienic ways to produce it, which is creating jobs, improving nutrition for kids, and building a sustainable business around an animal that's naturally resilient to climate change. It's traditional knowledge becoming a modern opportunity. It's fantastic. And then, at the very same time, in Brazil, a youth women's water polo match is going on, and suddenly gunshots ring out nearby. The players, teenagers, are terrified. They jump out of the pool, but after a brief pause when it's clear no one in the game is hurt, what do? They get back in the water and they finish the match. It's a story of persistent, terrifying violence, but also of this strange, unsettling, and yet incredibly powerful kind of resilience.
So after all of that, after looking at all these 20 different stories, what does one day on planet Earth really tell us? I think it tells us that our world is a place of profound and simultaneous contradiction. On the very same Tuesday, we are carefully extending fragile truces, while our own ships are literally crashing into each other at sea. We are discovering hidden canyons that are speeding up climate change, while at the same time we are inventing brilliant new ways to build carbon-neutral houses out of dirt. We are cutting life-saving food to the most vulnerable people on Earth, while in another corner of the world, a single person's patience and compassion saves the life that was ours from being lost. It means that on the same planet, at the same time, we are always both building and breaking, connecting and colliding.
And that really leaves us with one final and I think essential question. The patterns that we saw today, the conflict and the innovation, the crises and the compassion, none of them were inevitable. They were all the result of countless choices, big and small, made by individuals, by communities, and by leaders. So if this is the complex, contradictory, messy, and sometimes beautiful story of just one day, the real question is for all of us. Looking ahead, what story will we choose to build tomorrow?
To keep making sense of it all, here's how you can stay with us. Follow us on Spotify and YouTube to listen to this podcast every morning at 8 a.m. GMT.